Christmas morning, 1982. Kids across America tore the wrapping paper off their presents. Inside was the brand new Atari 2600 game based on the biggest movie of the year, E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. The hype was enormous. Parents spent hard-earned money believing it was going to be a magical experience that brought Spielberg's film into their living rooms. But within weeks, that excitement turned to confusion, then anger, and finally disappointment. What was supposed to be Atari's crown jewel quickly became infamous as one of the worst video games ever made. This is the story of how a single game helped crash an entire industry. To understand how this happened, we have to rewind. In the late 70s, Atari wasn't just a company, it was the future of fun. The Atari 2600 was the console that made video games mainstream. Titles like Asteroids, Missile Command, and the legendary Space Invaders turned it into a cultural phenomenon. By 1982, Atari controlled 80% of the home console market. They were printing money, investors were ecstatic, parents were buying Ataris for their kids at record numbers, and the gaming industry was exploding in ways no one had ever seen before. But with great success comes great pressure, and Atari wanted to push even further. The early 80s saw Hollywood realize something big. Video games could sell movies. And no movie was bigger in 1982 than E.T. directed by Steven Spielberg. E.T. wasn't just a film, it was a cultural moment. Atari executives smelled opportunity. If they could land the rights, they'd have the best-selling game of all time. And they did. Atari paid a staggering $25 million for the license, a record at the time. Spielberg himself approved the deal. But here's the problem. They wanted the game out in time for Christmas. That gave the developer just 5 weeks. Enter Howard Scott Warshaw. He was one of Atari's star programmers, responsible for hits like Yar's Revenge and Raiders of the Lost Ark. If anyone could pull off a miracle, it was him. But even Warshaw admitted the timeline was insane. 5 weeks to design, code, test, and ship a game that would carry the weight of Atari's holiday sales. He did what he could, but corners had to be cut. Features were stripped down, testing was rushed, and the vision of making something magical was quickly replaced by simply getting something, anything, onto store shelves. Atari went all in. They manufactured 4 million cartridges, convinced this was going to be the biggest game in history. Commercials flooded TV, stores stacked shelves floor to ceiling. Parents bought the game in droves, kids popped it into their consoles expecting an adventure. And then, reality hit. Instead of heartwarming movie magic, players were greeted with frustration. The game dropped you into blocky, confusing environments. You wandered aimlessly. You fell into pits, over and over and over again. The goal was to collect pieces of a phone to call home. But most kids didn't even know what they were supposed to be doing. Magazines and critics tore it apart. Players abandoned it after minutes. It wasn't just a bad game, it was a broken promise. Word spread fast. Retailers couldn't move copies. Parents demanded refunds. Kids traded it away in playgrounds for anything else. Of the 4 million cartridges produced, nearly 3 million went unsold. Atari was left with a mountain of unwanted inventory. Losses mounted. Investors panicked. And the industry, already saturated with rushed, low-quality games, began to collapse. By 1983, the great video game crash had begun. Then came the strangest rumor of all. People whispered that Atari had buried millions of unsold copies in a desert landfill in Alamogordo, New Mexico. For decades, it was dismissed as an urban legend, a myth. But in 2014, a documentary crew dug into the site, and there it was. Crushed, dirty cartridges of E.T. stacked under the sand. The myth was real. So, what does it all mean? E.T. wasn't just a bad game, it was a symbol. It showed what happens when hype outweighs quality, when money and deadlines matter more than creativity. Atari never recovered, but out of the ashes came something new. Nintendo entered the US market, rebuilt trust, and reshaped gaming forever. E.T. was a failure. But it forced the industry to grow up. Today, it stands as a warning, and strangely, as a legend. Because in the end, E.T. for Atari wasn't just a video game, it was the turning point.